Greetings, fellow scribes! Welcome back to the archive! This week, I continue my series on the different pantheons in Scion 2nd edition by continuing with the third pantheon in the core 2nd edition hero book, the Kami of Japan. Now, let's be honest. American culture has, because of anime and the anime invasion, has gotten some interesting views of things that come out of Japan. I'm not going to be sure I'm 100% accurate on everything I say. I've done research, I've tried finding as much as I could ahead of this. But, like many of the Eastern religions, Eastern storylines, there's a lot of contradictions. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy as I try to make heads or tails of the Kami of Japan. One thing you have to understand when you talk about the Kami of Japan is you're dealing with an incredibly syncretic pantheon. What this means is things from outside get accepted in. So you have of course, the original Kami, the heavenly and earthly Kami. These represent the sort of different cultural groups of Japan. The earthly Kami, like Inari, trace their roots to the Ainu people, the people to the north of Japan, that have been traditionally treated very poorly by the rest of Japan. And then you have the heavenly Kami, the Amatsu Kami, that are all sort of directly connected and descended in some way from Lady Amaterasu, the sun goddess. And then you have the result of the Buddhist invasion of Japan, or at least of their pantheon. Now you have to understand, when you look at the history of Japan, Buddhism wasn't really accepted very well at first. And then, gradually, it sort of merged with the Shinto of Japan. And on one hand, you got Zen Buddhism. On the other hand, you got a number of the Buddhist bodhisattvas elevated into deities in the Kami. These are the fortunes. Like Ebisu, fortune of luck and fishing. Kishoten, fortune of beauty and mercy. Fukurokuju, fortune of longevity and wisdom. But, as I mentioned, there's this sort of confusion and changing of tales as well. For example, Amaterasu at one point went hiding in a cave. Either she was angry at Susanoo, or she was angry at her brothers Tsukiyomi. Most likely angry at Susanoo, because that's the one that most telling's tale. And all the different gods tried to find a way to get her out. Some tried arguing logic with her. Some tried, just different, tried getting a rooster to crow. Because, hey, the sun has to come when a rooster cries, right? And finally, you get to the end of it, when she is finally talked out. And there's two versions, really. And there's combinations between these versions, of course, but the two main versions are, one, a giant mirror was placed, and there was much cheering, and Amaterasu came out to see what the cheering was about, and was entranced by her own reflection into realizing that she was screwing up. The other option is that Ama no Uzumi, the goddess of the dawn, the Amatsukami of the dawn, put on a dance. It's often described as a bold dance, though you can tend to view it however you want, and that Amaterasu was drawn out by watching the dance, and the cave was sealed up behind her so she couldn't run back into it. You know, that these are the sorts of things. There's divergences here. But that seems to be a case with any of the Eastern religions. You know, why does the sun and moon never show up at the same time? Well, that's because Amaterasu is angry at Tsukiyomi, the Amatsukami that is the moon. Well, you see, he kind of got upset at a deity that was making a feast at Amaterasu's request, and he kind of killed that deity. Now, there's different explanations for why he was upset. The most friendly one to put up is that the particular goddess, Ukimochi, vomited out the feast. Because that was her nature. That was what she was. She was a kami of food and such, and so putting forth a feast was putting forth from herself. And, well, Tsukiyomi found it objectionable and killed her. And Amaterasu got really, really mad and has forbidden him from her sight. Now, every so often, you get a solar eclipse when Tsukiyomi tries to beg forgiveness from Amaterasu. And that's why the sun and the moon are never seen in the sky at the same time. Most of the time. Now, of course, when you look into it, the core principles, the virtues of the kami are sincerity and right action. Now, wait! How do these conflict? Because, you know, all of the virtues kind of have some sort of conflict between them. Well, sincerity is doing things as if you believe it. It is, you know, to do something with your whole heart. Right action is to do what is right whether you believe it or not. And this is where you get into the conflict. It's sort of the whole Ninjo and Giri thing. The do I do what my personal beliefs say, or do I do what is expected of me? And that is sort of one of the core philosophical conflicts in anything Japanese related. And it permeates into what they wrote for the mechanics for Scion 2nd edition. Now, what's kind of interesting is I have seen stories that actually say Susanoo was a titan. Well, was a dragon, which is the closest thing to a titan you can really get to. But something else that's really kind of interesting with how the kami in Japan work is they have their own little divisions and all this, but an outside threat shows up, even the titans of Japan will help defend against it. The isolationism, the self-reflection and all that, it is so ingrained that even the titans feel it. For the most part, the kami get along pretty well with all the other pantheons. They're kind of frustrating to deal with because, the conflict between sincerity and right action, but they get along cordially with most of them. Ironically, one of the pantheons they get along the best with are the Celtic Tuatha De Danann. And, well, this leads us into what's probably the greatest weakness of the kami. They're the best. Every single last one of them. They'll never say it, because to do so would not be humble. But they all absolutely believe that of all the pantheons, they are the greatest. And, well, you can get them to slip up by revealing this superiority complex, which would cause disharmony, which would cause issues for them, because one of the core things that they ultimately strive for is a sense of harmony. You wouldn't believe it by looking at the history of Japan, the warring states, the isolationism, or, the little war in the Pacific in the 40s. But they do, the kami themselves strive for harmony. And in fact, one of the things that they put into here is that Amaterasu views what happened in the 1940s as a failure on her part, because she advised the emperor She always advised just the emperor. She didn't advise his generals, his political leaders, etc. And they kind of pushed the emperor to going ways he shouldn't have, which led to the whole little thing in the 1940s. At least that's how it's put in here. And that since then, Amaterasu has started advising more than just the emperor. That she started acting as an advisor and a matronly figure for all of Japan. Like I said, this part is something that was put in. It doesn't really match any existing stories because it's in the modern era. And most of these stories stop sometime before the Meiji Restoration. So, that is the discussion on the Kami of Japan. Next week, I talk about the native North American pantheon that was put into here. And I'm probably going to horribly butcher this, but next week I talk about the Manitou of the Anishinaabe. Like I said, I probably utterly butchered that. So until then, I'd like you all to remember to have fun and keep gaming.